Good morning, or afternoon, or whenever you're watching this. Today we are talking about program design for speed and agility training. So let me get my PowerPoint up here. We'll get started. All right. So as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about speed and agility. And when we think about this, again, I will tell you that a lot of this information came from Boo Schnecksnader, and he was a track coach at LSU and has a PhD in exercise physiology. And so again, he is really world renowned when we think about speed training in particular. So again, a lot of this information came from a presentation that he gave that I attended a few years ago. So when we think about speed training, again, three aspects that we're interested in. Let me see if I can get my pointer going. Here we go. Three aspects that we're interested in. Number one is speed, or the skill to achieve high velocity movement. Change of direction is another factor that we need to think about when we think about this as it relates to strength and conditioning. And again, this is the skill to explosively change movement direction, velocity, or mode. And again, when we think about the application of this, I would say the hardest part of change of direction type of things is the deceleration portion of that. So again, thinking about that is really important. Agility is the skill to change direction, velocity, or mode in response to a stimulus. So speed requires the ability to accelerate and reach a maximal velocity, whereas agility requires the use of perceptual cognitive ability in combination with the ability to decelerate and then re-accelerate in the intended direction. So again, a little bit more complicated. The other aspect that's really important when we think about agility is that other element involves reading a situation and knowing how I need to adapt to where the ball is, where my opponent is, or some other element that's specific to sport. So we think about speed development. How do we prioritize this? It's really important if we want to work on true speed, max velocity types of things to have patience and progression. Okay. So this component of fitness must be a priority in order to actually see improvements occur. So what I mean by that is you can't rush this, and you have to be very diligent about quality repetitions in order to truly develop speed. And I think a lot of coaches kind of I don't want to say underestimate, but maybe under prioritize how to do this from a scientific perspective. And so when we think about the major components of speed development, it's all about neural integration. And this neural integration is going to follow a different set of rules. I think a lot of people, for the most part, think that, you know, if you want to be good at something, we got to grind and we got to work and we got to keep pushing and push your limits, et cetera, and things like that. But when it comes to developing speed, it's different than that, right? So we want to do very quality repetitions with a high amount of rest so that we can kind of replicate that quality time after time or day after day. So we think about speed. Again, speed is generally a neural quality. Again, we can talk about how we improve strength and how strength relates to power development and how that can kind of cross over into the world of speed. But when we think about speed as it relates to actually running and actually doing that portion of a strength and conditioning program, we need to think about improving that neuromuscular integration. Okay, so we're going to have improved recruitment of motor units, improvements in the rate coding capabilities, and improvement of the synchronization of the motor units that we're utilizing. So speed, strength, and plyometric training produce many neural adaptations. So again, we're asking the nervous system to adapt to all sorts of different stimuli. Strength training can enhance what's known as our neural drive. And this is the rate and amplitude of impulses sent to a target muscle. So again, very, very common for us to link speed training with strength training. And again, we can think about how that kind of correlates to that neural drive element and how we can activate the nervous system in a way that's going to be purposeful related to that skill that we want to do, whether that's running or whatever it might be. Okay. Plyometric training causes a change in excitability threshold of motor neurons. Okay. So again, we're looking at making those motor neurons more easily excitable so that they can respond to that stimuli. So when we do plyometrics, and again, we'll talk about that in more detail in this class, we're asking that stretch recoil cycle to really be eliminated so that we can experience a greater change on the opposite side of the stretch. Okay. Because sprinting requires an athlete to move at high velocities, strength and conditioning professionals should prescribe exercise that increases the neural drive. So again, thinking about choosing those true basic strength parameters in the weight room will also highly correlate with that neural integration that we want to see with our speed training. So we want to overload the musculature, particularly in the hip and knee regions, and those actions that are involved in that stretch shortening cycle. So again, if I want to be fast and I'm having a hard time really thinking of a whole lot of sports where you don't want to be fast, really the three things that I need to do are speed training. I need to do strength training following the strength parameters so that I'm gaining strength from a neural perspective. And I need to do plyometrics. Okay, so those three things are kind of our best bread and butter for improving maximal strength, and also some of the elements of acceleration, which we'll talk about. Okay, so again, when we think about training the nervous system, what does this look like? Again, we really want to have quality work. Okay, so again, we want to be working at close to maximal capacity, long rest periods. We might have 5-7 minutes between some of these things, low volume as well. So again, this concept is less is more is really important here when we think about this. And then we want to understand what our percentage of neural work is within the program. The other thing that's I think gets a little bit tricky with this is we think about when we do this type of training, if we're outside and we're doing quality work and we're having long rest in between, we're really putting athletes at a high risk for injury if we have these long rest periods and we're asking them to do 100% intensity. Okay, so again, in the best case scenario, we're doing this in a temperature controlled environment because we have these long rest intervals. And so therefore we can kind of keep those muscles warm so that we're not at risk for injury. So again, that's maybe a huge obstacle for some of our strength and conditioning coaches that want to do this work outside. And as you know, like it's not always going to be optimal temperatures all year round when I'm working with athletes. Let's see what else. I think I'm good there. Okay, what about agility? Again, athletes can improve their change of direction. Let me move my little thing up here. Can improve their change of direction ability through the development of a number of physical factors and technical skills during a variety of speeds and modes of movement. Now, in order to really become good at agility, we can start with kind of some basic exercises and some basic drills and things like that. But the emphasis has to be on the application to the sport as well. So again, what does agility look like if I'm a basketball player versus a football player? Okay, so again, so thinking about that application is really important, but we can certainly start with some kind of basic drills and things like that to kind of get that process going, because regardless of what sport we're doing, that deceleration and change of direction is going to be kind of fundamental. Okay. So the development of agility requires improvement of perceptual and cognitive abilities, as we said, in relation to the demands of the sport. So it's not enough to be good at stopping and changing direction and starting. We also have to know how to read the situation and know where to do that and how to kind of navigate that in a sports specific moment. This requires emphasis on eccentric strength, maximal strength, concentric explosiveness that will be required during that reacceleration portion. Okay. We also want to think about perceptual and cognitive factors. So this includes visual scanning, anticipation, pattern recognition, knowledge of the situation, decision-making time and accuracy, and reaction time. Okay. Most of these aspects can be sport specific and probably would be beyond our scope of our practice, but certainly we can emphasize eccentric strength, maximal strength, concentric explosiveness. So we can kind of focus on some of those things through different plyometric activities, and kind of focus on allowing somebody to move linearly, whether that's forward, backward, and then also lateral movements, diagonal movements. So again, allowing us to kind of stress those muscles and those variety of planes is really important in the weight room. But again, when we think about how does this relate to the actual sport, a lot of that's going to be in their sport itself. So we think about these perceptual cognitive focus, again, so visual focus. So visual focus in response to an opponent, focus on shoulders, trunks, and hip. So again, if I'm guarding somebody in basketball, for example, I want to look at their hips to determine where they're going to go if they're trying to kind of get around me and I'm the defender. Okay, so again, thinking about that and how we want to focus on our opponent. Again, some of these are a little out of our scope of practice as a strength and conditioning coach, but certainly important elements to think about when we're working with athletes in any regard. Okay, body position during braking and reacceleration. So the trunk will lead into the deceleration, and from there, body lean is needed to redirect your movement direction. So you want strong alignment with the ankle, foot, knee, and hip. Okay, enter and exit changes of direction with a low center of gravity. So again, we'll kind of practice some of these in class when we get to that practical piece, but thinking about body positioning and core strength and how important that is to allowing us to quickly change direction is important. Leg action, make sure the athlete can effectively dissipate eccentric braking through a large range of motion. So again, we think about that slowing down process. Are they able to cope with and handle the deceleration portion of agility? And then arm action, again, powerful arm action should facilitate leg drive. Don't let your arms be counterproductive though. So again, we want to think about how we can utilize those in an effective, economical manner in order for us to kind of maximize our bang for our buck when we think about energy usage. So we think about different components associated with speed training. We've got different forms of speed. So we can think about accelerative power. So again, our ability to kind of get up to speed, absolute speed, or maybe more like your maximal velocity, something like that. Like what's the fastest that person can run? Speed endurance, we're looking at how long can they hold that max speed? Can they hold that max speed for 10 meters? Can they hold that max speed for 40 meters, right? So again, kind of similar with what we talked about in exercise physiology about VO2 max. Like I might have this number, but somebody that's elite might have that same number and be able to hold that intensity for a longer period of time. So that's what speed endurance is. Speed of movement, again, that's another factor that's important to think about. Power, so again, we're looking at not only speed, but also strength. So looking at those two elements together. And then multi-directional speed, can I move fast in a lateral way? Can I move fast if I backpedal, et cetera? So again, we can think about changing directions and also moving our bodies in a variety of planes that way. So one thing that we can do in speed training or acceleration training is something called assistance training. And I'm going to talk about some of these different elements here in just a couple minutes. But essentially, when we think about assistance training, it's also known as overspeed. And this will allow athletes to run at super maximal speed. So again, the idea is we want to try to get the athlete to be running faster than they could in a regular scenario, basically. And so some examples of this, we could pull them with a bungee cord. We could do downhill running, even at a slight grade downhill running. Again, it takes the gravity a little bit out of the question. So those are a couple examples of how we can create assistance running. You could also do something like with a tailwind as well. That would give you a little bit of an assistance. That's not listed here, but that'd be another example. Benefits of this, explosive athletes can run at a higher velocity, and so therefore it can allow them to increase their stride rate. And again, when we think about what are the two elements that determine how fast someone is, it's stride rate and stride length. Okay, so understanding how big your stride is and how frequently you can put your feet down. Okay, so it's going to help us with that stride frequency or that stride rate. We can also look at potential neuromuscular adaptations to increase maximal sprint velocity. So again, if I can run at that pace, am I able to make more neural adaptations so that that pace becomes more normal for me? So again, kind of hitting a large range of paces is really nice. And the higher I can get, the potentially the higher my ceiling might be. Disadvantages, it can allow us to have kind of chop steps. So again, a chop step negatively affects running form because they're rushed through the phases of the technique. So again, if I'm not used to having that high of a stride rate, it can maybe alter my gait a little bit, and so that might be negative for us. Which maybe that's why when we think about this assistance training, very, very minimal change here. So I'm talking, when I say downhill running, I don't mean we're running down Loris Boulevard. I mean, we're running down a very slight decline. So that we're not creating too much of a change from what our normal is. We also want to increase, or I'm sorry, one other disadvantage is we are going to increase braking forces. And so again, you think about that eccentric pull from going downhill or whatever it may be. Too much eccentric action might cause us to be really sore. So that can be a little bit challenging. I could be sore for 4 or 5 days or whatever if I do too much eccentric work, which might negatively impact me in the long run. Okay. Practical suggestions. Coaches should be careful to assess assistance modalities before implementing them. So again, we want to think about this. Not a lot of research to support huge gains with this type of training. Again, like I said, just a very small downhill or a small tailwind might be enough, even from a psychological perspective, to kind of help an athlete push through and, improve their strength or speed in that regard. But not a lot from the scientific perspective to say like, yes, everyone should be doing this and we should all be doing it, once a week or anything like that. So nothing like that at the current time, saying that this is like the end all be all to speed training. We think about methods of developing speed. Again, strength development is important for that speed development. Okay, so again, I think a lot of times strength and conditioning coaches do a great job of speed development, but what are we doing they do a lot for strength development, but what are we doing to make our athletes fast? Okay, so again, strength means absolutely nothing in most sports if I don't have speed or power to go behind it. Okay, so I can bench 300 pounds, but if I can't catch somebody to tackle them, then it doesn't matter anyway. So again, I think that we a lot of times undersell speed development and focus too much on strength development in sport, whereas you really need both of these. Both of these are very important in most sports when we think about what makes a good player. Okay. The transfer of strength improvements to sprinting requires some specificity of training, including similar movement patterns, peak force, and velocity within the lift. So again, we can talk about power exercise. We can talk about plyometrics and how those might be specific to what we want to do in a strength regard or in a sprint regard. So again, thinking about how can we link these factors and how can we prioritize them both so that we are improving somebody's speed. Because again, it never hurts to be fast. Pretty much in most sports, having speed and having like a high absolute velocity is a huge advantage. So thinking about how can we incorporate that into their year-round plan, there's never a bad time to be fast. So thinking about how could we use this more as a mode to allow our athletes to continue to improve. Okay, so we think about resistance training as it relates to sprint training. Okay, so examples of resistance training include sled towing, wind resistance, incline sprinting, and sled pushing. Okay, so again, when we think about wind resistance, I'm running into a headwind. Incline sprinting, I might be doing some short hill sprints. Okay, sled pushing, so again, I might be in kind of that athletic position where I'm hinged forward, cores tight, and we're keeping our hips in line with our shoulders and our ankles. So again, good body position for the sled pushing type of thing. Sled towing is when you put the sled behind you. Again, we can talk about this more in class when we go through some of these things, but those are, I guess, the sled things are a little bit more advanced in terms of like what you might have access to and what is logistically feasible. But anybody can do short sprints on a hill. So again, that's a great example of what we would consider this resistance training. So benefits, it accentuates good biomechanics for acceleration. It overloads the acceleration phase, particularly because I've got that forward body hinge and I'm kind of in that diagonal body position so that I am focusing on that acceleration, and produces higher propulsion forces. Disadvantages, if the resistance is too much, it can lead to shorter stride lengths that are not as specific, and this could negatively impact biomechanics or natural sprint gait. So again, when we think about these hill sprints, for example, I'm not talking about running up 17th Street, because again, we're going to be so far away from our absolute max velocity that there's going to be very little crossover to maximal strength for those. Now, certainly those can be beneficial for lots of different reasons, and we want to get our heart rate up and blah, blah, blah. Like there's other reasons why we would want to do those, but those are not going to help us become faster. Those are not going to help us with max velocity. We need a less incline so that we can be closer to our true max velocity when doing them. So we don't lose that biomechanic impact, and we don't lose that specificity of movement speed. Okay. Practical applications, don't use loads that decrease running velocity more than 10 to 12% for sprinters. Field sport athletes can use a resistance of 20 to 30% of body weight to improve the initial 5 to 10 meters of movement. So again, we're looking at that acceleration portion here. And again, when we say 20 to 30% of body weight, we're talking about either the sled pushing or the sled towing. And again, some of that has to do with what's your strength level to start with too. So again, if I'm 160 pounds and I'm a freshman in high school and I'm not that strong yet, wow, this is going to be really challenging. Versus like a small girl that's super strong, super fit. Okay, well, they can handle more than this. So again, thinking about how we might apply that depending on that individual is important as well. So speed and strength, again, we said that these two components are certainly linked. Strength improvement as a result of speed training will increase. Okay, we're going to have improved neuromuscular integration. So again, we're getting better at that efficiency perspective of connecting the nervous system with the muscular system. High tension levels. So again, think about the amount of muscle mass that I'm activating, and the more fit I become, the greater the amount of muscle mass is that I'm activating. Advantage of neural-based strength gains. Again, we can experience the absence of hypertrophy. And again, for a lot of people, that's a good thing. Think wrestler, for example, like I want to be fast, I want to be strong, but I can't afford to get bigger at this point because it's a weight determined sport. Again, even in a sport like if I'm a sprinter in track, like I don't necessarily need to get bigger, right? I just want to get stronger and I want to get faster. So we want to experience the absence of hypertrophy for that particular type of person. So again, just a couple examples there. Coordination gains. So again, thinking about that efficiency as it relates to synchronization of those motor units firing, and also the muscle or the body movements. Okay, so those joint movements will become a little bit more coordinated, and then improvement of movement equality. So again, thinking about how can we move in the most efficient way. Some of that stuff hopefully kind of self-selects. Again, we can give them some coaching cues to kind of help with that as well in terms of different running mechanic elements. Okay, so methods of developing speed. So we think about mobility. Mobility is super important for this. So again, thinking about hip mobility, what a buzz term to talk about in sport. A great sales tool, if you will, if we're thinking private sector strength and conditioning. So mobility, the freedom of an athlete's limb to move through a desired range of motion. Okay. So this, I like the term mobility because it's a little more applicable. So again, we're thinking about how do we apply this to what that athlete needs in order to do the best that they can. Okay, so again, having good hip mobility for a sprinter might be different than good hip mobility for a distance runner even. And good hip mobility for a swimmer would be even different, right? So again, thinking about what is their desired range of motion based on the sport specific movement. Okay. So again, thinking about that is more important than just kind of generally trying to improve their flexibility. Okay. So again, this is going to help us to produce and maintain optimal stride length through the joints freedom of movement. We can do this through all sorts of different modes. So stretching, whether that's dynamic and static, myofascial release, so like foam rolling, massage, chiropractic. So we could also do like some partner active range of motion types of things as well, to help these people reach that optimal mobility for hips particularly. But, you know, in other sports, maybe shoulder mobility is just as important. So again, thinking about how we can kind of apply those elements. So when we think about agility here, methods for developing agility, there's lots of different things. This stuff comes straight from your textbook here. So we've got dynamic strength and concentric explosive strength. So let's take a look at this. So dynamic strength is going to help us with mobility during body weight and loaded training. Okay, so again, if I'm a novice athlete, I can do some body weight things in the weight room. If I'm a novice athlete, I can do some different things in the field or court. So I can do different body awareness drills where I'm focusing on body positioning, lean drill. Some of us did this in exercise physiology earlier this week where we, and again, I'll go through this when we do our activity in class, but a lean drill is basically like you're going to start in an upright position, you're going to lean forward, and then when you feel like you're going to fall on your face, that's when you take off and start running. So again, it's all about creating that body awareness and that good joint angle when we are sprinting. Okay. Advanced athletes in the weight room can do different squat or pull variations to focus on dynamic strength. And then advanced athletes on the court can do different change of direction drills and things like that that might be specific to their sports. Okay. Concentric explosive strength. This is going to help us with the re-acceleration after we break. So again, when we think about agility, we're going to run one direction, we're going to stop, and then we're going to run a different direction and change direction. So again, when we think about concentric explosive strength, we're talking about that re-acceleration after I stop and I'm ready to go again. Okay, so novice athletes, let's do some box jumps. Our advanced athletes can also do that. Our advanced athletes are also going to do like Olympic lifts or maybe some loaded squat jumps of some sort to create that re-acceleration. Okay, in the field or on the court, we can do different acceleration drills. And again, we'll talk about those when we actually do those in class, but we can do some different things there. And then for our advanced athletes, they can still start with those acceleration drills that we would use for novice, but we can also do advanced acceleration drills such as a sled push or something along those lines. Okay. Other elements for developing agility, the eccentric strength is going to be used when we are doing that braking phase. So again, I'm going to run fast, then I need to brake or have eccentric strength in order to stop myself so that I can change direction and go a different way. So for our novice athletes, we can do a drop landing. So something like a depth squat, something like that. So I'm on a box and I'm jumping off and kind of sticking that landing. That would be an example there. We can do some deceleration drills for both the advanced and novice athletes where we are getting up to speed and then getting ourselves to a stopping point. For our advanced athletes, we might use some various angles for deceleration. So again, trying to run diagonally, but also even running backwards and decelerating is important as well. Okay. In the weight room for our advanced athletes, we're going to do some of those drop landings. And then as we focus on those Olympic lifts, that catch phase is eccentric heavy because we're trying to absorb the weight from the action. So again, those elements will help us with that deceleration phase in agility. We think about reactive strength. Again, this is going to help us to transfer from high eccentric to concentric explosiveness. Okay, so again, that transition from eccentric to concentric. So again, think really plyometrics here when we think about how to apply this. So again, I'd throw the drop landing in here. That's going to help a little bit to kind of facilitate the eccentric element of this process. However, in the weight room, that's kind of it for them. We could do plyometrics. Again, you could consider that field or court or weight room really for the beginner, advanced plyometrics for advanced athletes. Like we said, loaded jump. So it might be like a loaded squat jump or something like that. And then those drop jumps or a depth squat, something along those lines for that reactive strength element. All right, what else we got? We got a few more here to talk about when we think about developing agility. So we can do multi-directional strength. This might be lunges, a Z drill, whether it's lateral, forward, backward. So again, trying to think about how we can move our joints through multiple planes and in multiple directions. So again, thinking about that either in the weight room or on the court. Again, unilateral lifts can help with this in the weight room. So again, like a single leg squat, single leg deadlift might be good. High velocity drills, changing direction through different cutting drills and things like that. That again, we're getting into some sport specific types of things that you would want to do in the court or field. And then when we think about perceptual cognitive abilities here, again, this is going to be progress in visual scanning, effective anticipation, and decision making. So again, this isn't something that we can really do a lot of in strength and conditioning, but these are elements that we're going to work on in sport practice and in our games and things like that. So being able to read a situation and know where I need to go and kind of anticipate what might happen and things like that. So we can do some simple reaction drills, introducing an increase in temporal and spatial uncertainty. So again, we'll do this like depth jump thing where they jump off the box and then I would stand there as a coach and you can point either direction. So they don't know which way they're supposed to go until they complete the jump. So they do the depth jump and then they have to be able to respond and move either to the left or right, or you could send them diagonal in one way or whatever. So again, those kind of simple reaction drills are nice to kind of get them involved. We could also do something with a ball as well, where they might come off that depth jump and then have to catch a ball or something like that. 1 minute. And then agility drills where we have restricted temporal and spatial aspects is important for maybe our more advanced athletes. Okay, so we think about program design. How does this all come together? There's a lot going on here. So I want to take a look at this in terms of how do we best organize this? And I think unique to this type of training and really different than what we talked about with endurance training is we kind of do things, almost backwards from what we do in endurance. So what happens here is we're going to start with acceleration development. So block 1 will be just specific to acceleration. So again, we're starting from a standing position. We're going to get up to speed, things like that, and develop acceleration that way. So short little intervals to kind of work on that. Okay, block 2, I'm still doing that acceleration development, but I'm also going to focus on max speed as well. So we're focusing on sprint speed, kind of spreading out those intervals, making those intervals a little bit longer. Block 3, I'm going to continue to focus on that maximal sprint speed. So again, kind of those longer, let's call it 70 meters, something like that, versus acceleration maybe was like 30 meters. Okay, so longer sprint speed there. We can also get exposed to speed endurance depending on the athlete. Again, if I play football or baseball, I don't really need a whole lot of speed endurance. I might do a little bit of work with that, but not a whole lot. That speed endurance might be more like 150 meters or 180 meters, something like that. So again, looking at being able to stretch that max speed or that max velocity out to a little bit longer. And then lastly, block 4, I'm going to enhance my max speed. So again, continue to work on that speed specific stuff like 70 meters or whatever, full, all out with full recovery, maintain acceleration abilities, and then continuing to improve speed endurance. Okay, so again, the periodization strategy here will allow that athlete to kind of work on these different phases. So again, think of this as kind of like your macro cycle. And these are your, maybe like your mesocycles here, where we're kind of focused on each of these elements as we kind of progress that particular athlete. Okay. So again, when we think about this idea of periodization, again, the run train sequence, we want to start with acceleration development. So again, looking at very short intervals. So let's call it 0 to 30 meters or something like that, where I'm just focusing on getting up to speed. Okay. Speed development, I'm going to get a little bit longer. So here, maybe my intervals are going to be 70 to 80 meters, or something like that. Okay. And then speed endurance, let's call this up to 200 meters. Okay. So again, when we think about the length of each of these repetitions, acceleration is short, speed development medium, and then speed endurance is going to be long. Again, what's the rationale for this? This is how we do this safely. So again, if we truly want to build speed, they've got to be prepared to do those things, right? So again, when you think about the quality that we're asking them to do, somebody comes in and they're out of shape, we've got to focus on just 30 meters. And once we can establish that in terms of their speed, then we can stretch it a little further. And then we stretch it even further. So again, when we think about preparation, that's an important element. Also, lactate physiology. Again, if I am out of shape and I'm trying to do speed endurance, it just turns into a big lactate fest. So again, we've got to do the things that we need to do to get our bodies prepared to be able to do speed endurance, because that's freaking hard. If I don't have max speed to start, then how am I going to build speed endurance? Okay, so again, it's this idea of maintaining speed over a prolonged period of time there. Oh, so I have some different things here for the speed development. So again, sprints of 40 to 70 meters. This is for that max speed that we're talking about. High intensity. So again, really, really, really fast. We want these to be pretty much all out. Complete recovery. So whatever that means for that particular athlete. For me, I think like 5 to 7 minutes is plenty of time. I don't know. I think a lot of sprinters would tell me that they could take more time than that for complete recovery. And then that's the total volume of work. So again, if I'm doing 40s, maybe I do 10 by 40 to get to that 400 meters. Okay. If I'm doing 70s, maybe I'm doing, I don't know, 6 by 70s to get to this, or maybe it's some sort of combination. I'm going to do 40, 50, 60, 70, and then back down or something. Okay. So again, lots of different ways to kind of slice this to get to that total volume, but the main elements, high intensity, complete recovery. Okay. Again, when we think of that acceleration, I don't know why I didn't have this before the speed stuff, but again, we're looking at sprints 10 to 40 meters. Again, we want to isolate that acceleration component. Okay, so we want them to get up to speed as fast as they can. 10 to 40 meters. Again, our total amount of work is 300 to 400 meters. So again, if I'm doing 40 meters, maybe I do 10 sets of this or something like that. High intensities, near complete recovery. So again, we want to avoid lactate. We want to avoid waste product accumulation, not because these athletes aren't tough, which is maybe what some people think. It's like, oh, sprinters are lazy. I think that's a common thought process for people that aren't sprinters. But we want to avoid this because if we start to have lactate buildup, it's going to delay or prevent us from becoming, from adapting from a neural perspective. So again, that's the reason we kind of want to avoid that. And then lastly, when we think about those speed endurance work, we are looking here at sprints of 80 to 150 meters, and we can have some variable speed constructs. So what does that mean? We could do like flies. So if I were going to do a 150 meter fly, maybe I do 50 where I'm accelerating, 50 all out, and then 50 where I kind of float back down. Okay, so again, something like that might be something that we would do for that speed endurance. Again, high intensities, complete recovery. We want to avoid the lactate system like altogether. We really want to stay in that ATP PCR system the best we can. If I'm getting up to 150 though, I mean, I'm getting close to, you know, for some athletes, 20 seconds, I would say 20, 25 seconds, somewhere in that range for some people. So you're getting close to really getting some anaerobic glycolytic input here, and we want to try to avoid that. So again, we want to keep the reps to, let's call it 25 seconds or so, okay, in order for us to prevent the lactic acid system. High intensities, complete recovery, and there's your volume, so you can split it however you want. We could do 6 by 100s, or we could do 8 by 100s or whatever. So again, you can kind of split that out however you want to. Okay, so we think about monitoring our speed ability. It's very common for us to use a 40-yard sprint test in many sports. And again, this gives us a really good indication of where their sprint capacity is. Because there's some errors in sprint timing, other tests may be used, and we might want to use something that's going to be sport specific as well. But this is a pretty standard test that we could utilize. Other possible factors to look at: ground contact time, stride length, flight time, stride angle, speed, acceleration as well. So lots of different things to kind of think about when we think about how to kind of assess that. Okay, agility development strategies. So again, we can look at components of multi-directional speed, such as linear speed is moving straight forward, plyometric performance. So again, using that eccentric to concentric movement, so that stretch shortening cycle, and then body balance strength development ratios. So again, understanding body positioning and strength and how that might play into our ability to change direction and read a situation as well. Again, we'll go over some of these in class when we do this in person, but a skip, fast feet, sprint resistance, incline for acceleration, deceleration drills, a Z drill, agility, Y-shaped drill as well. So we'll go over all of these in class so that you're kind of familiar with these if you haven't heard of them. Okay. I think that's it for today. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you soon.